I'm excited for this season of Rocket Motivation because my firm, Hand, Arundel, Harris & Sale, Attorneys at Law, where I am a partner, is our sponsor. We understand life and running a business can be challenging, but with the right support, it can also be incredibly rewarding. That's why we're thrilled to announce our partnership with Hand, Arundel, Harris & Sale.
A lot of people indicate that time heals all wounds. While time certainly doesn't heal all wounds, time does allow us the opportunity to deal with those wounds and to learn how to cope with those wounds. They're always there. They'll never go away. And that is the recipe for coping with the loss, is learning how to deal with that loss.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cade and welcome to Rocket Motivation Podcast. This week's guest lost his 2.5-year-old son, Charlie, when he was crushed by a dresser that fell on him in his home. This week's guest turned his grief into something positive and has successfully advocated for legislation requiring furniture to meet sturdiness standards. He also was instrumental in creating Charlie's House, a full-scale demonstration safety house. This is going to be a great episode. Brett Horn, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Thanks, Rod. I'm glad to be here.
So, Brett, let's do this. Tell us kind of where you are now in your life, where you live, family, what you do. Just kind of catch us up.
Sure. I'm a lifelong resident of Kansas City, all throughout the metropolitan area there, and still live in Kansas City today. And really the tragedy, which, we're going to discuss a little bit later, has kind of brought me into a world of child advocacy. And that's kind of what I spend most of my time on currently. So through an organization called Charlie's House and one called Parents Against Tipovers.
And tell us about your present family now in Kansas City.
Yeah. So in Kansas City, and obviously married to my wife of 26 years, Jenny, and I have 3 kids currently in 3 different colleges throughout the Midwest. So they keep us moving on the weekends.
Right. Well, let's go back to November 1, 2007. All right. So take us kind of going through what was going on in your life at that time and just kind of tell us what happened.
So in 2007, we had just in the past few years had been in a whirlwind because we had triplets. We had 2 boys and a girl in 2005. And we had already had a 2.5-year-old, Jack. So the 2 years leading up to November 1st of 2007 were kind of crazy. We had 4 kids in diapers. We had children moving everywhere. Jenny and I both working, and had a live-in nanny at the time as well. Doesn't sound as glorious as it was. It was just simply because we didn't have enough hands. But on November 1st, I was in sales and had a lot of windshield time. I was driving a 3-hour drive back from, and had actually just closed a big sale. It was the day after Halloween, and that Halloween, our kids were the Wizard of Oz. The oldest was the Tin Man, and then the 2 boys were Lion and the Scarecrow, and our daughter was Dorothy, of course. It was the cutest costume you've ever seen in the world. But driving back, celebrating my sales, and got a call that there had been an accident at home. And I needed to hurry home. Well, I was already. And like most people, I just assumed, it'll be okay. A dresser had fallen and hurt Charlie. And he was being rushed to the emergency room. And through the next 10, 15 minutes, I kind of figured out that it was a very, very severe accident. The ambulance had been called and Jenny was rushing home. And really within what seemed an eternity, but was probably only about a half hour, I learned that I had lost one of the triplets, Charlie, at the age of 2.5, to a dresser that was only 30 inches high, and it had tipped over on him. He had awoken from a nap, and the nanny did nothing wrong. We had an audio monitor and so forth, but that we didn't hear the dresser crashing. She'd gone up to check on him and saw that the dresser was over on top of him. The official cause of death was asphyxiation.
Well, when you first learned of Charlie's death, so what's going through your head?
Well, that day, I don't really remember much of the rest of that drive. But really over the next few weeks, it was just disbelief and guilt. I had not heard of tip over accidents at the time, and that really was common because they were really just now being kind of brought to the attention of the parenting community. There were some tips out there, but it was just something that I couldn't fathom or couldn't believe had happened to us, and I felt responsible. There is something I could have done to prevent that death. I could have anchored my furniture. Again, it wasn't a widely known hazard, but it was beginning to be known, and so I just couldn't. It was really shock and awe.
Well, so how did you deal with? Well, first of all, how did you deal with the grief? And then how did you deal with this feeling of guilt that you had?
Well, honestly, I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. And I just thought, both my wife and I, thought if there's anything that we can do to make sure that others don't experience, this type of pain and not only the pain of losing a child, but the internal battle that you dealt with, that knowing that you could have or should have done something to prevent that. And so we really, after the immediate grief and family and friends support and whatnot, the thing that probably kept us sane was after a few weeks of people over at your house, we looked over and we realized we had 3 other kids that needed our love and attention and needed us to raise them. So that was how we were able to continue, on a personal level. However, the accident garnished so much attention. We were willing to lend our story to anyone that would tell it. And we decided we wanted to do something, like many parents do, to ensure that this type of accident didn't happen to others. Luckily, we had the foresight to understand and know that tip over accidents didn't kill. It was one of those kind of odd categories. You can't start a whole organization based around tip over accidents, which I've since done that. But we started what we now call Charlie's House. And Charlie's House is a 501c3 based in Kansas City. And our mission is to prevent accidents and injuries to children in and around the home. Our vision was always, really since inception, probably within 60 days after Charlie passed away. But our vision was to build the nation's first safety demonstration home. And we did that. And it took a long time, but we opened on what would have been Charlie's 16th birthday on May 5th. I guess that would have been 2021.
One thing that I think is interesting is, like, this horrible event happens. And so you decide, you want to become involved in helping others so they don't have to go through this. But, it's one thing to say, right after it happens, okay, I'm going to do this. I think and a lot of people kind of have these grandiose ideas and plans that they never follow through. You followed through. What was it about you that made sure that you were going to follow through?
Persistence. I'm a salesman by trade, and I don't believe in the word no. I believe, maybe it's not yet. And I think, through the experiences at Charlie's House and just the passion and the persistence to see it built, and my experience with the Tip Over Project, which we'll get into later, I learned we all have superpowers, and my special power is to continue to push towards a goal and navigate that process with parties that sometimes might put up roadblocks or resistance. So that I think that's really the secret to why we were able to get Charlie's House done, is just a lot of persistence and refusal to say no to the hurdles that may have come up. But again, the delay in actually building the safety demonstration home was a positive for us in the long run, because it made us realize that Charlie's House as an organization had to be much more than a safety demonstration home. We had to have programs and outward community outreach programs that would ensure not only that people would visit our safety demonstration home, but that we were reaching people where they were. And so it was a good project, and it was good that wasn't rushed and took some time to develop.
Right. And tell us about Charlie's House as far as the success of it? I mean, how many people come through? I mean, what are your outreach programs? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, we do a lot. We have 2 full-time staff, and we annually give about 700 tours a year. Those are divided into several different groups: new and expecting parents, medical professionals. It's part of the curriculum for many of the nursing schools and doctoral programs to have to, as part of their curriculum, they have to come take a tour at Charlie's House. And then community partners, other organizations and entities that we deal with, the local hospital or other local charities, maybe transitional housing, that send their people through Charlie's House. But it is a 3,200 square foot full museum type experience where you tour around room by room and you listen to a little video presentation. You can go in and touch and feel in each room. So, for example, you might start with the nursery, and it'll talk about the ABCs of safe sleep, always alone on your back and in the crib for where you should have a kid sleep. We'll talk about the changing table and how to do that properly, baby swings and what is appropriate to put your baby down for a nap in and what isn't. You can move on to the bedroom and bathroom, obviously drowning hazards in the bathroom and chokeable items, blind cords, co-sleeping, gun safes, furniture tip over, escape plans, and much, much more from room to room to room.
All right, and let's switch gears a little bit. Tell us about the 2022 Sturdy Act that you were instrumental in getting passed. Tell us about that, what it is, and how it came about.
So Charlie's House was a personal drive and passion for me locally. But I began to realize after I got aligned with many other tip over parents from across the country that so many more lives could be saved through more of a national effort. And this one focused on tip overs is obviously close to my heart, as it was so many others. But I was aligned with several other tip over parents, and we formed Parents Against Tip Overs, again, a 501c3, of which I currently serve as the chair. But what we did is we jumped headfirst into the ASTM subcommittee for furniture safety, where we experienced a lot of tension and conflict with furniture industry leaders. They were a part of this subcommittee. The ASTM process it develops a voluntary standard by which most corporations should and do follow those voluntary standards. Most of the times, many of the times, they are safety standards. And the industry really was in a bit of a state of denial. They knew these accidents were happening, but the data was so incomplete. They would like to point to the other vendor in the room or the vendors who weren't in the room. And they really didn't want to advance the safety standard in a significant way. It was a fish to water for me. I enjoyed meeting people, talking to people, and working through these issues.
What was the final result?
So the final result was in 2019, I learned through watching that it was a bit of a show. They were not going to advance the safety standard. And so from that point forward, I decided to jump in and help some of the other parents who had wanted to pass some legislation. And it was called the Sturdy Act. And the Sturdy Act, what it does is it forced the CPSC to consider any voluntary standards and if those were significant or not. We started gaining significant progress on the Sturdy Act because we stopped avoiding Republican offices and started hitting them straight on. And so that was a successful strategy. And as we developed progress with the Sturdy Act, the industry decided that they needed to work with us and advance the voluntary standard so that when and if the Sturdy Act passed, the CPSC would have a safe standard they could point to, and that standard would be adopted.
Okay. And so the Sturdy Act has passed and it is now law?
Yes. So the Sturdy Act passed at the end of 2022, And as of September 1st of 2023, all furniture manufactured for sale in the United States must now pass a series of much more stringent tests than was ever required before. And before, again, they were voluntary tests. Now they are mandatory, and they are much more stringent. And if I could give you an example, prior to this new standard, this new mandatory standard, the standard for testing dressers for stability was to open all the drawers on a flat surface at once and see if it tipped over. If it passed that test, then you could open each drawer individually and hang a 50-pound weight from it and see if it tipped over. If it passed both those tests, it passed the stability requirements. That being said, there were still accidents occurring. And so what we did is, prior to that standard, we weren't literally, the industry wasn't even testing clothing storage units for stability with clothing in them. They're literally designed to hold clothing in them, and they weren't testing them with the weight of simulated weight of clothing in them. So now we have a mandatory test that does involve a weighted drawer to simulate clothing in it. It involves opening all available drawers and hanging weight from them. And the weight is a higher weight. It's 60 pounds instead of 50. So all available drawers rather than just one drawer at a time. And it simulates carpet, because oftentimes dressers are put on carpet. And it simulates the dynamic force of a child interacting with the dresser and perhaps opening it from a horizontal pressure.
So to recap, it is your loss and what you have done since your loss of Charlie. You've basically dedicated your life since then to making the home and furniture safer so this doesn't happen to somebody else.
That's exactly right.
Well, let me ask you this, and here we are, it's Halloween, so tomorrow is the anniversary of Charlie's death. How has the loss of Charlie changed your life?
It's pretty much dates my life with everything I do. You kind of remember when you go through a tragedy like that, you kind of remember, oh, that was before Charlie, that was after Charlie. It's the milestone in our life, which will always determine our next steps. And I think what it did for me personally is it really allowed me the opportunity to use my skill set to bring others to the table. It's fine to be frustrated and angry and mad at life or mad at the manufacturer. But if you truly want to reach a solution, you need to learn how to sit across the table from that manufacturer and speak to them. They are parents and grandparents too. And I had a unique ability to be able to cross that bridge and make that happen.
Well, Brett, what have you learned about yourself through this ordeal and everything you've been through?
Well, what I learned is that we all have strengths, and, I'm maybe not quite as good. In fact, I'm not good at all at the emotional stories of Charlie's passing, because sometimes I'm too emotional. Some of the other partners I have in Parents Against Tipovers are amazing at using their personal story to get motivated, to get a reaction from the world or from the manufacturing side. But what I am good at is bringing people together and respectfully listening to the other side and trying to reach a solution. And I guess what I've learned more than anything is I certainly couldn't have done that on my own, nor could many of the other parents have done it on their own. We all had to join together to use each other's strengths in order to accomplish a goal.
What advice would you give to parents who lose a young child, as far as, I know you never get over it, but as far as, dealing with the grief and trying to move on, based on what you've been through, what advice could you give?
Well, I know when the accident first happened, we had many, probably hundreds of people who had lost children in various ways reach out to us. And one card stuck out to us in particular, and it said, a lot of people indicate that time heals all wounds. And this particular mother who had lost a child said she didn't find that experience to be that way, and nor have we. While time certainly doesn't heal all wounds, time does allow us the opportunity to deal with those wounds and to learn how to cope with those wounds. They're always there. They'll never go away. And that is the recipe for coping with the loss, is learning how to deal with that loss. And you don't have to pass a piece of legislation or build a safety demonstration house or do anything like that. You just have to find your way to deal with that loss.
And, I know that Charlie's siblings were really young when this happened. He was a triplet. How have your other children, how have they handled it? Or, was it because they were so young when it happened? Do they not remember much about it? Or what kind of, conversations do you have with them? Kind of just tell us about that.
So the older one was 4 at the time. And so, Jack does definitely remember Charlie, a little bit. And when he was entering kindergarten and throughout the first several years of school, certainly learned how to use our tragedy. He was a smart kid, learned the reactions that other adults would get, when he would say, well, I just missed my brother or something like that. So it was kind of interesting to watch Jack navigate kindergarten and first grade. But the other two, to say they remember Charlie, I think they remember Charlie through our eyes and through our work with Charlie's House and through the stories that they've heard. And they all, we have symbols just like any family does. A star is a symbol for us for Charlie, and Charlie enjoyed Thomas the Train and Elmo. And so we all try to remember Charlie in our own special way beyond Charlie's House. But I think what's interesting is, since he was a multiple, every milestone, the kids going to kindergarten, middle school, their first date, their homecoming, their graduation, there's always something missing. And we have to celebrate, obviously, with the other two, Bridget and Will. And we would absolutely not consider doing anything else. But there is always something missing on those milestones.
Right. So Rocket Motivation Podcast, it's all about, the reason we started this is bring on guests who can, give advice and to people that are going through some tough times or dealing with adversity. So let me broaden the question out. Brett, based upon, what you've been through and what you've gone through in your life, what advice would you give to somebody who's just having a tough time, going through some adversity in their lives? What advice would you give them to get through it?
One day at a time. Take things one day at a time. I really think, especially after the initial tragedy, we had to force ourselves to wake up each morning and tackle that day one day at a time. And it does become easier. You learn how to cope, and it is good to have a goal in mind. And for me, it was the construction of Charlie's House. And once that was done, I was able to focus on a new goal, and that would be the passing of the Sturdy Act. And it's good to have those life goals. It doesn't have to be, it can be something professional in your current course of work. It can be something personal. But remember, there are other people that are reliant upon you after that tragedy, and you got to get out of bed and function one day at a time.
Gotcha. If people want to learn more about Charlie's House, how can they do it?
Our website, www.charlieshouse.org.
Right. And I guess, do you need, or do you take donations in case somebody wants to give after hearing this podcast?
Absolutely. Our mission is to prevent accidents and injuries to children in and around the home. And we do that through a lot of different ways. And certainly do take donations. We can also, for families out there that are wanting to child-proof their home, they can also order some free safety supplies on Charlie's House website as well. So that's an important aspect to remember.
Okay. Well, Brett, I want to thank you so much for coming on and telling the story. I mean, this has been fantastic. I mean, not only just, what happened and how you dealt with it, but just, and all the great things that you've done. And I think, I would think that some of the listeners, especially young parents, would want to, and I would highly recommend, going to the website of Charlie's House, learning all about, how you can safety proof your house. And it's just going to be, I think that's just invaluable information to have. But Brett, one thing, I always give the guest the parting shot. So why don't you give us some great advice that we hadn't already talked about, something to take us home that is going to just send us home with some great stuff and close this show out.
Well, I have two thoughts. The first is more practical for those parents that you just mentioned. If you have young parents or even grandparents, if you have a child in your home at any point in time, it can happen to you. Don't hear stories like mine and think, oh, that won't happen to me. Go to the Charlie's House website, any other child safety website, and learn how to properly childproof your home, and do it today. Don't wait, because trust me, it can happen to you. And more of an idealistic leave behind, I guess I would say, in order to reach consensus or compromise, this is more related to the Sturdy Act. I think sometimes we often think that it's supposed to be easy. We tell a tragic story and people are supposed to just fall in line behind it. I really don't believe that consensus and compromise should be easy. I believe it should be messy and hard and frustrating. Otherwise, it would exist from the beginning. And ultimately, I just don't think that in many of these situations, political situations or otherwise, we are too often guilty of letting the pursuit of perfect get in the way of progress. And that's how we were able to advance safety in this situation with tip overs, is don't let perfect get in the way of progress.
All right, Brett, great stuff. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your stories.
Thank you so much, Rod.
What an episode with Brett Horn. What a great example of turning tragedy into something positive and providing us with motivation to not let tragedies in our lives shut us down. Tune in next week for another inspiring episode of Rocket Motivation Podcast. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, my law firm, Hand, Arundel, Harrison Self, with offices in Mobile, Birmingham, Fairhope, and Athens, Alabama, and Destin, Panama City Beach, and Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. We are uniquely situated among the Southeast major law firms to provide legal direction to clients throughout Alabama and Northwest Florida. So whether you're looking for legal advice, litigators, or simply a partner you can trust, Hand, Arundel, Harrison Self is there for you. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out Hand, Arundel, Harrison Self for all your legal needs. Visit our website at handfirm.com. And if you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cade, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.